Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand, owner of the company Horns of Odin, and today I'm joined by Craig Brooks, who is also known as the Saxon Forager. Welcome, Craig. Do you want to let people know what you do, what you specialize in, and what we're going to talk about?
Or what are we going to talk about? We shall find out. I'm actually, I'd start off by saying I'm a painter and decorator by trade. So I'm not academic before anyone thinks that I am. But it's just something that I've ended up getting into. I've kind of fallen down a rabbit hole and it's taken me on an interesting journey. And I think I've got to the point, I often say that it's a hobby that's getting out of control, but I think it's gotten out of control. I kind of started off with Viking age reenactment, mainly portraying Anglo-Saxon. And mainly I cover food and drink.
Mm-hmm. Two of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
So, okay, you do yourself a disservice, as so many people do. What did you say before? You were on Channel 5, which is a British TV channel, one of the main 5 terrestrial ones, mind you. That's no mean feat.
Yeah, I was on with Ratcha Dave, who used to be on Time Team.
Okay,
and I was talking to her about Viking age food on a program. Oh, I can't remember the name of it now. It's Vikings, Blood Conquest, and something. I can't remember. It was a 3-part series a couple of weeks back, and they said I was experimental archaeologist. So.
There you go. That's what you should have led with. I feel like painter and decorator wasn't the best lead, but I'll forgive you. No, it's, people. Yeah. I think people always do themselves a disservice, and especially, it is terrifying when, like you said before, recently anyway, Bob's been booking some really high level, amazing scholars for me to talk to, but. In my opinion, I think certainly with experimental archaeology is such an important part of understanding the past. And I think sometimes it can be overlooked. You have to find a balance between everything. Everything has to be homogenized. Is that the right word? I think so. Everything has to be. I was going to say balance. Stop trying to be smart. But everything has to have a balance to it. You have to have your scholarly people who look at the textbooks, look at exactly what we know and kind of what we can say for 100% certainty. But then you have to have people like yourself who are going to go out there and get their hands literally dirty and find stuff out by doing, because I think that's the best way. Sometimes, you can read about something as much as you want, but until you have it in your hands and you actually try use it, do it, create it, make it, you can't really understand some of the troubles and the nuances behind it.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of why I mentioned painter and decorator first, because I'm a physical person. I was never that good at schoolwork. It wasn't my area, if you like. But whereas if I can get my hands on something and actually do things, so if I can get replica pieces of Viking cookware and a rough idea of what ingredients they're using and combine the two things, then that's kind of how I learn.
Mm-hmm. That's in my opinion, it's the best way. I was the same. The only lesson I could really listen in, or two, would be PE and history. And they were the only ones I really could kind of sit and concentrate. And the rest I was just not interested in. And it was no surprise that I ended up I became a plumber and then fell into Horns of Odin. And, I could never imagine just sitting at a desk in an office or any type of role like that. It's just not suited to me and who I am. But that doesn't mean we can't get involved somewhere.
No, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it, which is what that's one of the things that also got me started, was that people kept seeing me do home brewing and bread baking and stuff and saying, "Oh, I wish I could do what you do." And it's like, well, you can. You've just got to get your hands dirty, as you said before, and actually, do it. And that's why I started posting stuff to sort of the social media sort of line of things.
Yeah, it does influence people, and it does make people want to do stuff. The amount of times that even silly things like obviously with my Instagram, my personal Instagram now, I do a lot of going around different places and taking videos, kind of explaining what they are. But even as simple as just going to the gym, I just post a gym picture and people they'll message and be like, "Oh, you know what? That's made me want to go to the gym today, and I'm going to go." So it does influence people,
motivation.
even if you don't realize it. And people look at stuff and they'll discover things they've never done. And I think most people probably just go, "Oh, that's cool." But there's a certain group that'll go, "Okay, I'm going to try do that now."
Yeah. Yeah. Do their own experiments as well.
Yeah, it's good. It's good that you've kind of found your little groove with that. I feel like I should give a disclaimer as well, because I feel like I'm sounding extra husky today. I was working at a trade show over the weekend and my voice has gone. So I'm sounding quite, I think quite sexy, but I'm not sure whether everyone else is going to agree with that, but that may be why I sound a little different to normal.
Do you know what the weirdest thing for me, this is like coming out of the bubble a little bit here, but is that I listen to you whilst I work. Mm-hmm. So I was listening to you today, talk to Jonas.
Okay.
And so now I've got you on the same headphones.
Oh yeah.
So I've got to remember I'm not listening to a podcast.
No, you have to you have to reply.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you do have to reply. No, before we start, I had one of the worst days, or I wouldn't say one of the worst days of my life, but I had a very shit, awkward day on Thursday that I kind of wanted to share, because it was such a bizarre series of events that I just couldn't believe that it was happening. So on Thursday, me and Eddie that works for me, we set off down to London for the show that we were working at, and I forgot my wallet in true me fashion, I guess. And I wasn't far out of Huddersfield, and I remembered, but I was like, you know what? I've got my phone. I don't need it. I've got my phone. I can pay for anything I need on my phone. I've got some cash. It'll be fine. No worries. We drove all the way down there, spent the day, got everything set up. And then about 7:00 in the evening, we got to the accommodation, and I went to get the key and rang the gentleman. He was like, "I don't have a booking for you." But this is the worst case scenario now. So he was like, yeah. I'm really sorry, but there's an old booking on booking.com, and we've asked them to remove it. And I don't know why it's letting you book it, but we don't have any space. So obviously now we're a little bit panicked. It's 8:00. We're in London. We're a long way from home. I don't have my wallet. And so I rang booking.com, and apparently they have to find you somewhere else. But what is frustrating is, though, that they refund you the money, which then takes like three working days, but you have to book somewhere else with your own money. And if it's more, then they'll refund you the difference between the two places, but you have to send them an invoice for them to. So it's a whole thing. But anyway, we don't even get to that point. So I'm on the phone to them for an hour and 3/4 trying to explain the situation. And then they say I'm going to have to book somewhere else. So I go to use my phone. My screen stopped working. The whole screen on my phone stopped working. My phone just won't work. I'm getting like haptic feedback from the side buttons, but it's just completely stopped working. So then I'm starting to panic. I'm like, shit, I need my phone for the event. I don't have my wallet, and we don't have anywhere to stay. What are we going to do? So thankfully, Eddie's wife, Meg, booked us like an Airbnb close by, and we managed to stay there. And I reimbursed the money after, but because I needed a phone, I had to then drive from London to Huddersfield at 10:00 at night.
Ouch.
To pick up my old. There was another series of events. So we thought we'll go and buy a new phone. Like, what's a phone? Like we could pick up like a cheap Android for like 50 quid. So we got an Android. I think it was like £70. It's not the end of the world. Not the best thing. I didn't want to do it. Not the end of the world though. Put my SIM card in, loaded it, set it up. Tried to log in. So to use an Android, you have to go through Google. You have to log into your Google account and then you can download apps and use the phone. Couldn't get into it because this smart guy had set up two-factor authentication, which is brilliant. Apart from you need your other device to accept the two-factor authentication. And I couldn't log into my email anywhere because that's two-factor locked. So I couldn't use the phone that I just spent £70 on. So I'm left holding that. And I'm like, there's the only thing I can do is drive back home. So 4 hours at 10 o'clock at night, get my old phone, sleep for 3 hours, and then drive all the way back down to London to do the show at 9 o'clock in the morning. And it was just, one of those where you have that series of events where it's just one thing after the other, and it's just a little cycle of things that's just tripping you up over and over. And it was just, that's probably part of why my voice is so fucked now, maybe. I couldn't believe it. It was every little step just wouldn't work. I had no money for fuel. I had half a tank of fuel left. I was I really hope I get back. Thankfully, I did. So that didn't go wrong. But yeah, it was. Did
you have a good weekend afterwards? Was it worth all the effort?
No, it wasn't. It was shy.
I was hoping you were going to say, "Oh yeah, we sold everything. It was amazing."
Yeah, I wish I. Trust me, I wish I could. I really wish I could, but unfortunately, that's a whole other thing. I don't want to slag off the ComicCon, but they said they'd sold out, which would be 12,500 tickets if they'd sold out on the Saturday. I mean, I'm no numbers expert. I don't know, genius who can count people really fast, whatever you would call it. But there fucking wasn't 12,500 people in that place. So yeah, it just ended up being very disappointing. It wasn't what was expected. So the whole weekend was a little bit of a write-off.
Yeah.
But
you get them sometimes.
Yeah, it happens. You can't.
There's always a knock-on effect as well, isn't it? It's never just the one thing. It's always a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's it. It was just we just couldn't catch a break. At one point, when I was on the phone to Booking.com, we found a little bench to sit at in a park. And we're like, look, we need to sit down and kind of collect ourselves and see what we're going to do. And this little car drove around and can't stop there, closing in 5 minutes. Who the fuck closes a park first and foremost? And then it was just that little thing. We finally sat down and no, can't sit there. Come on, move on. It just, when you just can't catch the break.
Yeah. I'm amazed that you managed to drive all that way and back again. I would have probably just said, "Oh, fuck it."
I didn't want to, but I needed the phone for the card machines. That was the main reason for going.
Yeah.
So I needed to be able to link up the card machines to trade at a show that no one turned up to. I mean, I got my wallet. It was fine. It was fun. I found a new podcast to listen to, so that was good. Well, okay. That's enough about me, I guess. Let's talk food. Yeah. Food, drink. I guess we should start with how much can we tell about how people ate in the Viking Age? Just to set some sort of expectations on what we even know what we can know as concrete fact, I guess.
Yeah, well, as I'm sure you're well aware, there's not much written evidence for anything from the period. We have a few of the Anglo-Saxon leechdom books, which give us kind of the medical recipes. And you can kind of gain a little bit of knowledge about food from that. There's things like sage and pepper omelets. So you can kind of work out that there may be 8 omelets. But other than that, we don't have much in the sort of written stuff. So a lot of it is just going to be based on the archaeological stuff. So we can tell what ingredients they have. Even down to the way sort of certain bones are cut and things. You can tell butchery techniques. But after that, it is a lot of playing around, which I guess is probably why it's a bigger area for something like experimental archaeology, because no one can really say for sure how they ate stuff. You know, I can say they cooked dinner in a pot, and I can say they had these vegetables or these herbs. And after that, it's kind of conjecture. It's how do you put it all together and make a dish out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing there isn't many just recipes.
No, not unless you start looking sort of slightly later period and you go towards sort of the Norman stuff. But from sort of this part of the world, we don't have much, as I say, other than these leechdoms.
Okay, so we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't have recipes, or if we do the very, like you say about a pepper sage omelette. It's
I mean, to me, the idea of a recipe book wouldn't make sense at the time, because it means you have to go out and get this set of ingredients to go and cook that recipe. Okay. Whereas you're going to use what's available to you, aren't you? It's not going to be like we can do now and pop to Sainsbury's or wherever.
No, that's a good point. So I guess, well, this is a guess. I'm assuming that maybe recipe books came in for the more affluent people who can have an abundance of.
I'm trying to remember the period, the exact time, and it slipped my mind now. But there's a book called The Form of Curry, which was a religious text. It's not a religious text. It was a royal text. Sorry.
Okay.
And that's, I think it might be 12th century. Don't quote me on that. But that's got some recipes, and the way that they write then is completely different to what we're used to now as well. Because it will just say, take this and add it to this, or boil this. It doesn't like give quantities or like specifics. There's kind of almost like whoever's doing it is expected to already know what they're doing.
So like you're on Great British Bake Off then?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's what they do. Yeah. It's like, here's a piece of paper and it's just like, mix this or add sugar.
Make a roux. What?
Yeah. I assume most people will have known. Well, I mean, it was important to know how to cook. Like you say, you couldn't just, it wasn't, ready meals and a microwave weren't available. You kind of had to learn and know. And I would guess that most knowledge was just passed down from generation to generation, taught in daily life.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah. I mean, so the other place I probably should mention that we can get some information from is other archaeological stuff. So like residues on pots, for instance.
Okay.
Or like even there's a bread, I think it's from Burka, and it's from I think it was a cremation. But when they've tested the bread, they can then sort of work out what was in the bread. So there are some indications of maybe the recipes, but even then it's a little bit of guesswork. Like that one has what most people think of is it's got blood in, so we call it black bread.
Okay.
And it's because it's been analysed and it's got protein in it, but it lacks fat. So then it can't have been from meat or fish being added to the bread. So it seems like blood is the most likely sort of added ingredient, but even then, like it's an interpretation. So
human blood, what do you think?
What's that?
Human blood, what do you think?
Do you know, someone asked me that the other day. They thought because I was saying it was from a cremation that they drained the body, put it in the blood. No.
Oh, bless them. Bless them. I mean, it would make sense. I know now I love black pudding, I'm going to be honest. But I think most people are quite squeamish. I've said it a bunch of times on here how food now comes in this nice little cellophane packet that you pick up from the supermarket and resembles nothing of the animal that it used to be. And not food, well, meat. So we've kind of become detached from that, or most people have. But back then, it would make so much sense that they would use the blood. It's part of the animal. It's got nutrients to it. Why would you not? Why would you not save it and use it and put it in food? Make a nice reduction from it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've done, as well as doing the bread itself. We've done things like black pudding. Now, did they make black pudding? It's an interpretation. They may have done. They were probably making sausages. It's only another short leap to something like black pudding.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, I assume this is, like most things, it's going to depend on, wildly depend on the geographical location. So I'm guessing the diet of somebody in Yorkshire would be completely different to somebody in Scandinavia or northern Scandinavia, where maybe it's a bit colder. And
I mean, I focus most of sort of my research in the UK because that's where we're based. So the food I'm cooking is UK based.
Okay.
I know a little bit about the Scandinavian side, but it would have varied, and it would have changed depending on where they were living at the time as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you get a differing climate and topography, maybe the right word, in the UK alone. So I guess even here you would have a different varied diet on what animals you can keep, what vegetables are going to grow, and what you can harvest. I assume would just make a big difference. So you couldn't. What I'm kind of getting at is that you couldn't just say all Saxons or all Vikings ate this.
No, absolutely not. No.
Which is usually what people are looking for. Yeah.
I mean, there will be some stuff that's probably more, common. I mean, sort of like a one pot stew is probably you're more likely to be your sort of daily food, and it's probably quite repetitive, whatever it is you're eating.
Mm-hmm. And I assume I'm guessing there would be no leftovers. That everything.
I mean, this would be my own personal opinion, but I'd say if you had leftovers, it would go into the next day's meal. It's not going to go to waste, is it? Like, people still do that today.
Oh, they do, and that just got me thinking of I think it was China. I remember seeing a reel about this. It's kind of like a stew soup thing that apparently has been cooking for like 11 years or something, maybe even longer. And it's like just this giant pot, and they must just always keep it on, always keep it stirring and just adding to it, taking from it, adding to it, taking and mixing in. And I was like, that's probably not to that extreme, but I imagine that's how it's usually always worked, is that you just use what's left, throw it back in, and just keep kind of recycling.
Yeah, and if you're chucking in, like we were saying about using the whole of something like blood, and then you've got your bones as well. So if you're going to chuck the bones into a pot as stock, then you're probably going to use that stock for a couple of meals. So it'll probably stay in the pot, and you'll chuck some barley in there, or some root veg or whatever it is you got the next day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do we know more about cooking utensils than the food itself? Because you mentioned about, pot residue.
Yeah. I mean, I would say we've got to be careful with interpreting cookware, because a lot of things like, metal cauldrons and things are found in grave finds, which are clearly from wealthy people.
Okay, yeah.
So that's only showing you kind of one side of your day-to-day person's probably not able to afford a lot of cast ironware. I mean, I use loads of the stuff for reenactment, and most people do. We have the reenactment fireboxes to keep our fires off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of metalwork that goes around that's probably not realistic for your day-to-day Viking or Saxon.
Okay. So how do you think they would cook then, I guess, in your opinion?
I think more likely is like the pot I showed you just now, something sort of pottery, or even like soapstone vessels.
Okay. Can they take like a naked flame?
Yeah, we do it all the time. In fact, most of these pots that I'm pointing, but you probably can't see any of them. I mean, you could probably see how black that is. That's from being in the fire.
Oh, okay.
It was that color before.
Yeah.
So they as long as you have to be careful, you couldn't just chuck it straight into the fire. You put it near the fire and gradually heat it and gradually introduce it to the flame.
Right. Okay.
Otherwise, it will just crack or explode, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's not hard for them to have figured that out. Maybe broke a few pots, but It's easy
Yeah.
enough. Okay. Yeah, I guess it's so easy to fall into the trap of what you see on TV shows.
Yeah.
Because that's what, certainly with something like food and drink, that's what kind of you just I don't know, you kind of just go by it. Whatever you see on the TV in the movies, you just go, yeah, it looks probably about right.
Yeah.
And
Big leg of lamb and
yeah, and you don't really think much deeper into it. You just see these big feasts, and that's kind of what you think. And I just assumed maybe that everyone would have had this big metal pot, but like you say, they would be expensive.
yeah. So it's going to depend on where you are or who you are more than anything.
Yeah, so we can't rely on the big fucking metal pot that everyone has.
But as I say, I've got them myself. It's one of those, they're convenient things to cook in versus pots, which you have to be a bit more careful with.
Yeah, absolutely. So ingredient wise, or at least like, do you think they were bothered about flavor? Do you think like how much does that? Because obviously at the end of the day, I think we can be picky about flavor now because we can get nutrients.
Yeah,
easy. But back when maybe it wasn't as easy, do you think flavor was a big part, or maybe took a back row, like a back seat?
I think because we know that they used to host feasts. You got these big mead halls and people are having a feast. To me, that kind of implies at least that people enjoy food. You get together, you gather, you slaughter an animal, you're eating the animal, you're drinking your mead. Mm-hmm. That says enjoyment to me. Now, whether you could manage to do that on a daily basis because of availability of ingredients is another thing. It probably day to day is probably quite boring, but I'm sure they would have enjoyed food.
Yeah, doesn't everyone?
Yeah.
So everyone. It is.
If you didn't enjoy food, you wouldn't make mead and stuff, would you? It's like,
yeah, food's just great, isn't it? But it's one of those things that, going off on a little bit of a tangent, that it's a necessity. Everybody needs it, but yet it can become so addictive as well, and it's this kind of very fine line and can be a double-edged sword where, you have to have it, but there are so many people who have eating disorders on, whether it's on both sides of kind of, bulimia, being anorexic or morbidly obese. You can have this kind of dissociation with it. It's such an interesting thing, really, because it's not like you can just, if you have a gambling addiction, you just have to not be around betting. You just have to remove yourself as much as you can. Or if if you're addicted to alcohol, you have to just remove yourself from it and try and not be in the areas or places where that's going to be a problem. But food, you can't just cut that out. No matter how bad your addiction is, you have to still have some connection with it. You have to still in some way have it, but not too much or not too little. It's a fascinating thing, I think.
Yeah, I've never really thought of it that way,
and it's
a weird one, that.
Yeah, and it does get the endorphins going sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you get a good meal. So what about spices? Do you play around a lot with that, or do we know what would be available to kind of add that level of flavor?
So yeah, again, there's some archaeological evidence. There's some of the leechdom references again, and I'd say, and I'm going to put myself down a little bit here, but in my first book, I would say I probably overused certain spices such as pepper.
Okay.
Which is something that would have been imported, so it'd be expensive.
Right. Okay.
Kind of learning, so to backpedal slightly, is that the first book I wrote was never meant to be a book for other people. It was me writing recipes to do at events, and I just compiled a list of finds and references to ingredients, and then I used those to make recipes.
Mm.
After a few more years now of sort of experience, you start to realize that although maybe it's referenced in a leechdom, doesn't mean that Joe Blogs up the road's got access to it, if you see what I mean. But
yeah, I get, but also, I guess this first time we've mentioned your books for people who are listening. You create or put these recipes down into books.
Yeah.
How do you find the balance between? I guess you've got to try and make it taste good. Obviously, you can make it as like try and be authentic and use the food that's available and whatever else. But it has to. If people are buying a cookbook and they're cooking it, they want it to at least taste good. So I would.
I've had reviews that say that some of them don't. So
I mean, but also I would. That's just shit people, because I would also expect that as well. If I was buying a book based on, Saxon or Viking age recipes, I would expect some of them aren't going to taste the best, and that would be nothing against the author. I would just kind of assume maybe it's 1,000. My palate's changed in 1,000 years.
It's possible. Ingredients would taste different as well. Things like apples were probably more like a crab apple, like the little things that you see on the trees in the autumn. Yeah. And they're quite tart and they're not sweet at all. So if you add that to a dish, it's going to completely vary to if I said to you, put an apple in this dish. Right. Okay. What you're used to as an apple is not the apple that they had.
That's beetroot. I was going to say that seems to be the case with a lot of food, isn't it? The food off the fruit, vegetable that we see today doesn't resemble what it would have been, 1,000 years ago. We've kind of bred it. Is it bred? What is it? I don't think is it breeding?
I don't know. Engineered?
Yeah, I guess
that sounds too structural.
But I think it probably is though, some type of engineering, GMO.
Yeah. To make them bigger and sweeter.
Yeah. Because as our palates have changed and things have got sweeter, we want to keep that. And I guess they want to sell more. An apple today is kind of like it's a little candy bar, isn't it? It's full of sugar.
Yeah. But it wouldn't have been back then. Beetroot was the other one I was going to bring up, because that's one that was grown previously for the leaf rather than the bulb underneath.
Okay.
Whereas everyone thinks of the bulb and not the leaf now.
I do like beetroot, but surely they would use both.
But if we've bred it over the years to extend the root, so maybe the root didn't start off as big as it is now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it was a leafy green plant, and over the years we've changed it to be about the root itself.
I mean, what does a beetroot leaf taste like? I don't think I've ever had
It's kind of cabbagey. It's a bit more like chard. It's probably better.
Okay.
It's kind of earthy tasting.
Yeah, I mean, the beetroot bulb is earthy tasting, so I would assume that would be very similar to the leaf.
Yeah.
I think this. I'm trying to think about how, because wild foraging has been something I would love to know more about, because it fascinates me that when. I'm sure you're pretty good at this. You can be out, and there's so much stuff that we can use and eat that just grows wild, and we don't. And I think most people would probably, maybe not necessarily people listening to this, but I think a lot of people in the general public would find it quite icky to go into the woods and pick their own, forage their own plants and then go home and eat them. They would, because it's not coming out of a nice little plastic packet from the supermarket pre-washed, they would for some reason think it's disgusting or it's going to harm them. But it fascinates me how much stuff there is that we can eat and what we can do. And I would love to know more.
It's one of those, my name's a bit of a confusing one, really, the Saxon Forager, because I wouldn't put myself as like an expert in all things foraging, but I do a reasonable amount, if you know what I mean. It's one of those, you start off with the simple stuff. Start off with like your blackberries. They're £2 a punnet in the supermarkets. They're free on the hedge.
Especially cost of living crisis.
And if you go out picking blackberries, not so much where I live now, but in our old house, like people look at you like you're a weirdo because you're in the hedge picking blackberries.
Right. Yeah.
And they're in the supermarket spending £2 on a tiny little punnet.
Yeah, and it's like, where do you think the ones you are eating have come from? Like, and it is that. It's kind of, I don't know if, and I think, again, like you said, people look at you a certain way, and then I think that discourages other people from doing it because they're like, oh, I don't want to be looked at like that, or they almost find it embarrassing.
Yeah.
Maybe like embarrassing because people think, oh, well, they can't afford to get them or something
maybe.
like that. I don't know what it is. Why there is this stigma of just eating things that grow naturally.
I think it's changing though. I think more people are doing it now. I mean, there's more of an interest in like, bushcraft courses and foraging days out. And like yourself saying you'd like to learn. I think more people are starting to come around to the idea.
Yeah, I hope so. But I've started getting into that. I started watching a lot of bushcraft videos and survival videos, bought a lot of camping gear that I've not used yet. I was like, I'm going to go camping. Me and Rocco were going to go camping. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Got all the stuff, got the tent. And then I hiked up, and then like a storm came in on top of where I was going to stop. Just before I was packing up, I was going to get everything out. Like a storm came in that wasn't on the forecast, to be fair. And it started absolutely throwing it down. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to get all my brand new stuff wet. So I'm going to hike back down and we'll try this another
It's probably
day.
not the best time to test your kit anyway, is it?
Well, that's that was my thought, is that I've not done it before. Then I'm going to have to try and dry everything out. And I did feel a little bit, I was like, because, it's camping stuff. It's meant to get wet and it's meant to get a little bit mucky. So I was like, I felt a little bit of a charlatan for being like, oh, I don't want to get all my nice new camping stuff mucky, so I'm going to go back down and we'll just try it when it's sunny and warm. But
a fair weather camper.
Yeah, exactly. But also for the first time ever camping, I was like, maybe I shouldn't do it in the storm.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
But it is, but it's just an example of, I think, of people getting interested in this kind of stuff. And I wonder what it is. I wonder if it is down to because obviously there is a cost of living crisis. Things are going up. Costs are going up for a lot of things. And I wonder if that's forcing people back to nature a little bit or what.
I think it's like a combination. I think like being locked down for a couple of years and people just want to get out.
I forgot about
back to nature. Yeah. And it's easy to forget about because we've most people at least have sort of moved along from that now. But when people were locked down and they couldn't go out, I think the idea of getting back to nature has really appealed to people. Well, yeah, for sure. Because people had the time to go out exploring, didn't they? And exploring new hobbies, I guess, and new interests, and really kind of find who they are and what they're like. But hopefully it carries on. Fingers crossed, because I think we all could probably benefit from a little bit of outdoorly knowledge. Yeah, like just so much that we've forgotten and become detached. And I guess you must learn so much from doing, what you do in the experimental archaeology, just getting your hands in and trying things, and when it goes wrong, because I think everybody's scared of things going wrong as well. We live in this age of where everybody's scared of doing something, and I'm bad for it. If I do a recipe and it goes wrong, I guess I beat myself up almost. I'm like, and that probably goes for everything outside of cooking as well. I try to do something and I expect to be able to do it perfect first time. I expect it to go just how we want, and I want it to look as good as the expert who wrote the fucking book on it, and I want it to look exactly the same. And then I beat myself up because it's like this expectation that it should be perfect. But you learn so much when it goes wrong. Yeah, I get stuff wrong all the time. I'm not an expert. I wasn't trained as a chef or anything, or a brewer. It's just years of practice. But yes, sometimes you brew a beer and it turns to vinegar or something. Like you take one sip and spit it out again. Like it doesn't always go to plan. But whether I think that might be a social media thing, because everything we see is perfect.
Yeah.
If I post a picture on my Instagram, it's going to be the thing that went right, not the thing that went wrong.
For sure. Yeah.
I think we're all guilty.
Yeah, I was talking about this with Jonas Lorentzen last week about how it's kind of it's not acceptable to be mediocre anymore. It's not, back, in the 50s or whatever, everybody wanted to be like the average Joe. They wanted the wife, 2 kids, normal job. Average Joe was like, it was a good thing to be. It was deemed to be a success to be that kind of middle of the road, just happy. Whereas now it's almost a failure if you're not Insta famous. You don't have like all these followers. It's almost like it's not good enough just to be you and be content with your everyday life. You have to be extraordinary in something, and it's a big pressure.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. Yeah, hopefully we figure it out and it becomes more normal, I guess.
It's still normal. It's still fairly kind of new, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like social media type stuff. I think we're still, as a species, I guess, learning.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know what to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So back to the food. What kind of things do we know that they would have cooked? What can we tell, or what kind of ingredients would they have been around? Are there some that they would have been around then and aren't around now?
I think the main difference there is, as we were saying before, about like your vegetables. Your vegetables are going to be bred to be different to they are now. But the recipes themselves, it's going to be your daily pot of some kind of stew, possibly with a bit of barley or some kind of grain in there. And most people, bread's going to consist of like a little round flatbread.
Is it mainly all just like one pot open cooking? Because obviously, do you not need an oven to make bread? And I guess did they have ovens? Was that?
Yeah, ovens do exist. They're more like clay ovens, like pizza oven type style.
Okay.
And so towards the end of the period, at least, I'm not so sure about the Vikings, but the Saxons were, they had bakeries, so you could actually buy loaves of bread.
Oh, okay.
But as far as sort of your everyday person, it's going to be a mixture of flour and water rolled out flat and, dry cooked on a flat stone, or if you're lucky, a frying pan.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess so it would be more like a flatbread, would it be like a naan bread, that kind of? Or would it rise a bit more than that?
It possibly could. I mean, your naan breads have got yogurt in, I think, haven't they? They're like dairy based.
Okay. Well, I was more just meaning for I guess in like size of like being like a flat type.
I mean, if it doesn't have any like leavening, like a yeast in there, then it's not going to rise at all.
Would it still rise even just on like a hot stone? I know nothing about cooking, so.
We've made things like, and almost like I suppose what we'd call a pita bread before, which is just if you use a slightly wetter dough, it puffs up when it hits the heat.
Okay.
But you wouldn't get a rise like you do on a loaf of bread, or like you said, a naan bread.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not getting like a typical loaf of bread, what you would get down at the shop.
Not unless you've got an oven. Yeah.
No. And I
mean,
guess
you could probably. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, I'm guessing they were quite rare, maybe, or do we not know?
No, they would have been fairly common to eat bread. Yeah. I mean, we've experimented before even making rolls in like the embers of a fire. So you just let the fire die out completely and drop a roll into it.
Okay.
And if you put some kind of yeast in there, it does, cook like a small roll. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there is historical evidence for leavening. Like they probably, I think the yeast they found in breads that have been found are the same ones used for beer brewing.
Okay.
Which kind of implies that you get like that sludge at the bottom of your barrel. You take that out, you mix it with flour, it becomes very active, and you can make bread from that.
I always this kind of thing fascinates me because I always wonder, like, we obviously know now that that's a live bacteria, and that's the reason why the bread rising. And I always wonder, like, how they would have known that then, because they're not understanding the science behind it, but they kind of just know we take this little sludgy thing here and mix it with this, and it's going to make the bread rise, and it's going to taste yummy. Like, I always just wish I could put myself in the place of whoever fucking found that out. Just like the person, and just like the same people with like the berries that you can and can't eat, like what fascinates me more, the people the ones that you can eat, but only when you've cooked it. Because I'm like, which fucking crazy person saw somebody die or get seriously ill from eating it raw and then was like, yeah, but I'm going to try cook that and then I'm going to eat it.
Or bury it for 6 months and
like
dig it back up.
Who was that person?
Yeah. I mean, I think with keeping it to the bread side of things, it's probably a lucky accident. It's same with things like vinegar. If you leave your alcohol out and air gets to it, it turns to vinegar. You can do it with a bottle of wine.
Okay.
And so you think someone probably did that accidentally and went, oh, that's really sour, but what else can I use it for? Because you don't want to waste it.
Okay,
so whether
someone I drop my gherkins in it and make little pickles.
Or whether, if they would have taken the sludge from the bottom of the beer and thought, well, I don't want to waste it. I'll use it instead of water to make my bread. And an hour later, it's bubbling all over the place.
The beer sludge. But I guess it goes back to this idea of that you really would not want to waste anything.
Yeah. But it tastes good, the beer sludge.
Does it?
In bread.
In bread.
It's another thing I've experimented with,
So you get a beer bread.
Yeah.
But it is, we do have this culture now of just throwing food away like it's nothing. Like, I know people, and it infuriates me, people who will throw food away just because the sell by date is off. And it really annoys me because like just fucking smell the thing. Just smell it and see if it's good, or taste it, or look at it. Because that's how you're going to determine, like, 100, 200, 500 years ago, things didn't have dates on it. It was literally just smell it and see. Yeah. Like, but even today, like the milk you buy, it doesn't know what date it's meant to be good for. Like the milk doesn't know. The milk has no idea. It's not like, oh, well, it says the 25th is when it goes out of date, so I better go out of date now.
Well, that's when you get into the difference between a used by and a best before.
Yeah, but it's just like, but even then though, even with the best before, it's like, it depends on how it's been stored, how it's kept.
The beer I'm drinking now is after its best before.
Does beer have a best before?
This one does. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
Best before.
I feel like in a lot of cases it's there to make you want to buy more, because obviously if you miss it, if you have something with a long shelf life, if you could just keep it for, keep it in the cupboard for 6 months, whereas if you put a little best before on there, it's only, you should have it, it would be optimum best before this date.
Yeah.
If you put that on there, a lot of people would just throw it away and buy another one. And I guess it keeps the nice little commercial train going, whereas we should really just try and keep things and just, I don't know, I just think you should just check it. Just check it.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people that will just waste things because the date's gone.
Yeah.
It's not for me. Yeah, I think we should be a little less wasteful. But that, I think back in the Viking Age, then it would have been a case of just use everything, use what you can.
Yeah.
I guess that's how you would discover new things. Then people would just be like, I've got this little waste thing. Let's throw. Oh, here's one.
Yeah.
What do you think some of the craziest little mixtures would have been? Is there anything that maybe you've tried and just go, oh fuck, that just doesn't work?
Well, there's creations that I've made that I don't like, I guess is the nearest I can get. Because as you say, we don't have recipes, but certain combinations just don't work for me personally. Things like pickled ox tongues.
Okay.
Ox tongue's okay on its at best, but you pickle
Yeah.
it's not the best.
Now, tongue's never been one for me.
Mm.
But I guess I was wondering if when you're in that kind of place where you're just experimenting and you've got something that's left over, whether you've just mixed it with something just to see and just kind of gone, yeah, that one didn't work. Because I assume that's what they must have done all the time.
Yeah, it comes down to not wasting it again, doesn't it? There's nothing that comes to mind. I mean, I've tried all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we did because we did a podcast in New York for your podcast. So anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about me and who I am, they can go and listen to Will You Vike It? And
Will I Vike It?
Will I Vike It? Sorry. So Will I Vike It?
Yeah.
And we did an episode on me, and you brought I made butter.
Yes.
And
I tried to keep yours interesting because I couldn't cook because we were behind the mixer. So I decided to bring you something that I'd made, something that I'd bought, and something that you'd made, except obviously you hadn't at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
But I couldn't believe how easy it was to make butter.
Mm.
So I don't know if you want to just explain how easy it is to make butter. Because I think, again, for most people, it's just like, it's just really difficult to make. I would anyway. Before I did that, I was like, fuck, butter would be so hard to make. I can't make butter. I can just go to the shop and buy it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I teach deer butchery and cooking, and I'll often throw butter into the day, and people will go home saying that was the best bit of the day. No, you butchered a whole deer. And you go home, I'm going to make butter when I get home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it is easy. I mean, there's a couple of ways you can do it at home. Anyone that's listening or watching wants to try is just to take some double cream, put it in a bowl, put your hand in the bowl and mix it with your hand, which is what I got Dan to do.
Mm-hmm. I'm still flabbergasted that it made butter. And it was just like normal butter.
It took you, what, 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And the heat from your hand helps. You could do it in a jam jar, which is less messy. I tend to get kids to do it that way because they can just shake the jar, pass it around a group when they get tired. Okay. And that works, but it does take, that can take half an hour.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's a slow one. Yeah. If you want to go down the Viking route, then they would have had wooden churns as well. But that makes large quantities of butter. So for what I'm doing with my displays and stuff, or I would imagine for like a small household, they're going to use probably the bowl method and mix it.
Mm-hmm. Would they? Okay. So would they have had salt? Because obviously that's the first thing we added to the butter was to make it a little bit more.
It's much more palatable.
Palatable for us. But again, I couldn't believe how. I mean, there is a brand, isn't there? Can't believe it's not butter. But I genuinely couldn't believe how buttery the butter was. I know that sounds so silly to say that, but I literally just, I had some double cream. I felt like a little kid in the moment. I had some double cream and I mixed it with my hand, and almost by magic, within a few minutes, I had actual butter. But I still expected it to kind of be like, it's not in my mind, I was kind of like, well, it's not actually butter. It's like this kind of butter, but it's not going to be like the butter
substitute.
Yeah, it's not going to be like the butter you get from the shops. And then I was like, oh shit, it's actually same as the butter I get from the shop.
Yeah, and you get your buttermilk from that as well, which is usable. You can make cakes and biscuits and stuff with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, you were asking about salt.
Yes.
Yeah, most of their salt would probably be used for preservation. So if you put it on the butter, it's going to help to store it for longer. You might
Okay.
put it on your cheese, that kind of thing. I don't think there's much evidence for adding salt to bread, interestingly enough.
Oh, okay.
It's saltless bread to our taste just doesn't work. I guess that comes back to what you said earlier about like different flavors and whether they had different tastes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even geographically now, we have different tastes. Different areas of the country will like certain
Yeah.
things, I guess. And over the span of 1,000 years, as obviously we've got more spices, more sugar. I think sugar is obviously going to be a big
Yeah.
one. More accessibility to things like salt. It only makes sense that our palates have changed drastically to what would have eaten. And I think it would be fascinating if you could take somebody from the Viking Age and be like, here's a hamburger. Here's a McDonald's burger.
There's a TV show in that, some kind of like wife swap type affair.
Yeah. And send
through history.
yeah, and send somebody back there and see.
Yeah.
So I imagine again to us, their food would just be bland.
I think it'd be monotonous. I think it's just going to be eating the same things a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess again that's our modern relationship to food, kind of we touched on before, where we eat for pleasure now. We're going out for meals. We're getting some like endorphin or serotonin release from food. Sometimes we eat when we're sad. We get all these kind of emotions attached to it. Whereas I think back then it would have been like, oh, we need to eat so we don't die.
Yeah. On most days, I'd say.
Yeah.
I think yeah, they still enjoyed a feast. So I'm sticking with the fact that they enjoyed food. They just didn't have access to it like we do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I didn't mean that they wouldn't enjoy it, but just more. I feel like the main role of food would be survival, or not necessarily survival, but just like it's just a necessity. Like we have to eat, not kind of this huge enjoyment to it on a daily basis. It just kind of and I guess it like says the accessibility to it as well. If you've had a bad harvest, I guess you've just got to eat what you can to get
possibly starve.
Like, eat whatever you can to get through to the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another sort of idea that people often get wrong, because people think of winter as being lean. But if you've done things right and you've got your harvest and you put all your food away, then you should have plenty to last you through the winter and into the spring. So actually, it's probably going to be springtime when there's less food available, because your stores have got low, and your crops are in the ground, but they're not big enough to dig up yet. So I think springtime it's a lot sort of different time period to people expect.
Oh, that must be terrifying. Of just like, I can't even imagine how scary that must be. Getting to spring, or even before that, or even even before that, before winter, the end of in autumn the year before, you're gonna know whether you've had a good year or not, and how much you've got. And if you're putting away and you're like, oh, it's gonna be close. Like, we've not got a lot here. And then when you get around to the next spring and little Joey's been a fat little bastard and he's been sneaking extras, and you get there and you're a good month away and you've run out.
Yeah,
that must be terrifying. I don't know. Yeah, what do you think you would do? Beg the neighbors, maybe eat little fat Joey.
I think there are examples of cannibalism. So,
are there really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a reference somewhere that says it was frowned upon by the church or something like that. Just frowned upon. Yeah,
I mean, you've got to do what you got to do, haven't you? It's yeah, you get it. I guess it is. You get in that. It makes sense. So you get in that situation where, like I just described, where that's a thing where you're kind of running out of food. You've got a month left. You've got the whole family.
Mm.
You kind of just got to eat one of them. I know it sounds horrible. It sounds so savage now, but it's like we got to. We're eating one of you, or we're all dying. So who's getting? Yeah, who's the weakest?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Go on. No.
I was just going to say, we have evidence of them eating other stuff like badgers and foxes too. I mean,
okay,
you'd imagine that was out of desperation.
Yeah, you would just. Yeah, you would just turn desperate, wouldn't you? You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know what to do. It would be. Oh fuck! I would hate to be in that position.
Mm.
Yeah, it would just be. It would be terrifying. I wouldn't know. Wouldn't know what to do. Okay, so what would be your favorite recipe?
As in favorite one that I've sort of created?
Both. Let's go both. One that either maybe we can. You have an idea of, maybe it's not an exact recipe, but one that we can maybe get a decent idea of, and then one maybe that you've just created from things that are available.
Yeah, I mean, I could do one that's potentially a combination of the two, I guess.
Sure.
So we make a thing, and apologies to anyone that's from Scandinavia because I'm going to butcher the name now. Pinnekjot, which I believe translates as stick meat.
Okay.
And is something that they have for Christmas dinner currently, as far as I understand it. But it's my version of that is I use goat ribs. So you salt the goat ribs and hang them up to dry. Which I think normally they use sheep's ribs in Scandinavia today.
Okay.
And they're basically, it's a good way of storing them. So potentially it's something that they could have done. It's just salted and hung to dry. There's no reason why it wouldn't work. And to cook them, you rehydrate them in water. And then you sort of simmer them on top of a lattice of birch sticks. So it acts like an old-fashioned steamer. So again, it's a technique that potentially they could have used. And that's one that we quite like doing quite a lot. But it's something that people still do today. So whether it's got any historical precedence, it's one of those, it's plausible.
Yeah. I guess that has to be the same for so much.
Yeah.
It could maybe have been done. But again, here's another one. Do you think people would have experimented with food that much? Because I guess now we have an abundance in. Yeah. No matter how you look at it, we have an abundance now compared to then. So we were able to maybe experiment a bit more because at the end of the day, we know we're not going to starve. We know we're not going to waste.
If it goes wrong, you order a takeaway.
Yeah, you can guess. Yeah, exactly. You can guess something. Yeah. Whereas back then, maybe that wasn't an option. So would you then experiment? Because if it goes wrong, little fat Joey's not getting his dinner.
You keep coming back to him.
Yeah. He's just a fictional character I've made up.
I don't know. It's difficult to say, isn't it? But I think certainly if you were, it's going to depend on your position in society. I think if you were someone that's got people that are cooking for you, you're probably going to expect them to wow you, aren't you?
Well, yeah.
So whether you then have access to enough surplus that they could experiment. Someone's got to experiment for us to get recipes in the first place.
Yeah. I guess it would be that. It would be it would trickle from the top down from the people who.
Yeah. And you don't have to do anything too extreme of an experiment to make progress. I've got distracted. I was thinking a little bit of, the story of Alfred the Great and the burnt cakes?
No, but.
Because that kind of implies that stuff went wrong.
Okay. What's the story?
It's probably just made up to make him look good.
Okay.
But the quick version of the story is that basically the Vikings have taken over most of England at the time, and he's hiding in the marshes in Somerset. And he goes to stay with a fisherman and the fisherman's wife. And she's making what their story, some stories say it's bread, some cake. Doesn't really matter for the sakes of the story, but the fisherman's wife leaves him in charge of said cakes. And when she comes back, he's burned them. And she tells him off for it.
Oh, you can't tell Alfred off.
But he accepts the telling off. So it's kind of, that's why they think it's probably made up, because it makes him look kind of humble and like he didn't be like, what? I'm your king. He's like, yeah okay, sorry. Yeah. And I suppose there's different versions. Some versions say it's because he was distracted by his sort of war strategies. And yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, he gets told off. So.
As a king, that's what I'd say. I'd be like, if she came back and she was like, fucking hell, Alfred, you burnt the fucking bread. What are we going to eat tonight? I'd be like, look, I've got to be thinking about keeping this country safe. Like, have you not seen those savages coming over from Scandinavia trying to take your land? Like, give me a fucking break here. You know, let me burn a few loaves. It's not my fault.
Maybe he was experimenting.
Yeah, maybe
it was just,
well, maybe you'd like it. I thought maybe you'd like it like that.
Yeah, someone had to burn something to know that people don't like burnt food. Well, some people do like burnt food.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I quite, and it depends on the food. I quite like charred food. I think it's lovely on certain things.
But a burned loaf or a cake is,
because you know how the real story will have gone. It will have been Alfred's burnt the loaves, but the fisherman and his wife don't dare tell Alfred that he's burnt the loaves. So they sit and politely eat the burnt loaves and probably break the only tooth that they have left in their mouth. But they're like, thank you for this bread. It's amazing. And Alfred leaves all like, yeah, that's the best bread anyone's ever had. That's probably what actually happened because they were terrified of being beheaded.
Well, I think it was written like a couple of 100 years after the event. So
yeah, that feels like
made up.
Yeah, it feels like a very silly story to remember, to have been passed down for generation to generation.
But it's often it still sort of comes up in schools and stuff today. This story of Alfred's burned cakes.
Yeah. It's odd what kind of survives, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just that weird, everything that he did for the country, and they just go back to the burnt cakes. Oh, yeah. He did this and he did that, but he did burn the cakes.
I wonder, like, his legacy, what did he want to be remembered for? A united England. But most people remember him for burning those cakes.
Yeah.
But he was humble about it, so it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so before we wrap up, is there anything we should know? Any recipes? Shout out your books? Anything we've missed?
Shout the books out? Yeah.
Yeah, anything we've missed?
We kind of mentioned them earlier.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, they're Eat Like a Viking. I've got 2, volume 1s and volume 2. And then there's another one which is more fantasy based. So it's Eat Like a Halfling.
Nice.
For legal reasons. Can't use Hobbit.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'd have ended up with a cease and desist.
Yeah, I never realized that Hobbit was a trademarked word.
It's thought that Tolkien came up with the word.
Oh, really?
And so it's, they can, I think it's normally Warner Brothers that goes after people.
Has it not been like 100 years now and it just becomes general property?
I don't think it's quite been that long yet.
No.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm sure there is that thing though, isn't there, where after like a 100 years, I think it's like 100 years or something. It's like that where things just become public, open to the public domain.
I think it will be, in our lifetime. I don't know. I don't think it's there yet.
No, yeah.
We'll
get there, and then you can change the title.
Yeah, that one's got more, like, you know, luxury food, pies and puddings and
Oh,
that sort of stuff. Yeah.
now you're talking.
Yeah.
So okay,
Yeah.
so with the eat like a Viking one,
Mm.
how are you getting to those, like settling on those recipes? Are they just you're looking at what would have been available at the time and what cooking techniques you think would have been
Yeah.
available and kind of
Yeah. So they're my interpretation of what food they may have made based on sort of everything we've talked about this evening, really, all the archaeology, put my teeth back in, the
yeah,
archaeological
yeah.
finds for the cookware and the ingredients.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's an interpretation. And I think I mentioned earlier, there's some things I do slightly differently now. Like I use pepper in a lot of dishes, which would be an expensive import at the time. But I feel like it's also something that if someone is that bothered, they could just not put the pepper in. Do you know what I mean? It's
You'll always get people who complain though,
yeah,
unfortunately, particularly in like
yeah.
this sphere. There are just some people who just want to pick at everything.
Yeah.
But no, it's I'm gonna have to get them from you and cook some of the meals and see when I finally
Yeah.
get it, when I finally get my own house again, which hopefully this has been a whole thing recently, just trying to get a mortgage as a self. I keep slipping my nipple out as well, for anyone, which is an odd thing for me to just randomly say if you're only listening to this. I'm wearing I'm wearing a sleeveless cut off top, and I just keep like popping a nipple out every now and then. So if you do want to see that, all the episodes are on YouTube. So maybe that's going to bump those YouTube subscribers. You know, you're gonna have to watch the whole episode to find this little bit. But yeah, getting a mortgage as a
Yeah.
self-employed person, which I'm sure you probably know, being a painter and
Yeah.
decorator, it's a fucking
Yeah.
nightmare.
Mm.
It's
It is.
just
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a good while now just messing about. Hopefully I can get
Mm.
something sorted and get a studio set back up and get some normality back and get back. That's the one thing I've missed is just cooking. Having
Yeah.
somewhere like my own real space to just cook and do what I want to do. I really do
Mm.
miss that. I think cooking is a great escapism for me anyway.
Yeah. I think there's like a mindfulness to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're kind of present with what you're doing, you know, before I sort of really got into cooking, it was kind of put something on the stove and walk away and watch the TV.
Yeah.
Whereas once you get into it, you realize you kind of need to be present at all stages so you can monitor what's happening all the time and adjust as necessary.
Yeah, that's it. There's different levels of cooking, isn't there? There's putting something in the oven that's kind of chips or something, something like that, and like
I still do that.
banging chips or
Yeah.
like chicken nuggets or anything along those lines, or like in the oven and just leaving it and coming back. And that is one level of cooking, I guess. But then there is another level to it where you're having to follow the recipe, chop everything up, get all your timings right, keep an eye on it. And it is, in my opinion anyway, similar to creating something. Anybody that's ever created anything is always has that sense of pride in it. They're like, look at this thing that I made. And you do get that, but just on a daily basis when you cook a nice meal. I always do that. When I do get a chance to cook, I'm taking pictures of it. I'm sending it to my friends and family and being like, look at what I made. They don't give a fucking shit. But I'm like, look at what I made. Look how good this looks. It's yummy. And there's like, yeah, I'm sure I don't get to eat it. Why do I care?
But it can be a communal thing as well. It doesn't have to be yourself in the kitchen cooking. If you get a group of people around a campfire and everyone's sort of chipping in and taking part, then it kind of brings people together as well.
I guess there's a reason why I also like everybody always congregates in the kitchen, whether it's any type of party. It's always the fucking kitchen. Everyone's always there.
Yeah.
There must be some reason to that. It must be kind of just the hub of.
We're drawn to it for some reason.
And it would have been that, like around, like you say, around the campfire, where everyone's just sat cooking, keeping warm, eating, talking, enjoying things, and then just carry on, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, let's wrap this up and we'll do a quick Q&A with the patrons as well after, if you've got maybe 20 minutes.
Got as long as you need, yeah, whatever.
Wonderful. Yeah, so if anybody listening to this, you support us on Patreon, it's Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology Podcast. £3 a month, you're going to get a bonus episode every week, and that will be a Q&A episode with the guest where you get to ask your questions. Either you can watch the episode live and put your question in there, or before the episode starts, you can submit a question and ask it for you. Also on there, you get access to the Storytime episodes with Jonas Lorentzen that we do, and they are a lot of fun. We just read through a different saga story, and we end up going off on a lot of tangents. It's me and Jonas basically just hanging out, getting drunk a lot of the time, and you get the whole back catalogue on there. And you get access to the Discord community, which is a lot of fun. Again, people hang out in there. We've built a nice little community of everyone that gets on. And it's often just popping off on there, going off on there. Is that a thing people say these days? It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of talking. We're all kind of friends. Yeah, it's a nice little place to hang out and meet like-minded people. So go and check that out. It's £3 a month, and it's worth it, I think. No, it is. It's definitely worth it. But yeah, Craig, what about you? Anything you want to shout out? You obviously shout your own podcast out. Yeah,
so Will I Viking podcast, you can get it on YouTube and all the usual podcast apps. You can follow me on social media, just Saxon Forager. Basically, if you look up Saxon Forager, some of the recipes are on the website if you want to have a look at the kind of stuff I cook rather than going to buy the books. And then if you like it, maybe go and buy the books.
No, buy the books. Just buy the books. buy the books straight off the back. That's what I said. Done. But it's a good thing to let people have a sample, but just
that's it. Have a look first, and if you like it, then buy the book.
And even if you're not going to cook from the book, buy the book anyway. Support Craig, but also put the book on a shelf and pretend that you cook. When people come around, they'll be like, "Oh, look at that! That's a really cool book." And you're like, look at this really awesome book, man. I eat like a Viking." But maybe you never use the book, but who cares? You can have it as a focal piece.
Just splash some sauce on the cover, make it look used.
Oh yeah. Splash. Just that is it. To be fair, that's a good point. I never realized this because I like to keep things quite clean and try and keep things tidy. And then when I really got into cooking, I was like, all my cookbooks are just fucked. And I'm trying not to, but I'm just like turning the page, splashing it with like soy sauce and everything else. I'm just like, oh, no, why? I've ruined my book. So I guess it's a well-loved cookbook, though.
Yeah. And you should see the state of mine.
Oh, I bet. Do you have do you use your own sometimes, and do you have one?
Oh yeah, I forget my own recipes. I mean, there's too many to remember. I've been in the middle of cookery courses before. I got, oh, hang on a minute, how do I?
There's nothing wrong with that.
You can't remember everything. No,
you can't, and it's I always respect people more when they do that rather than just try and not. I have guests on here, like high level scholars, and they'll be like, "Give me a second, let me check that."
Yeah.
And I respect that so much more than just bullshitting and trying to wing your way through. It's nobody can remember everything.
No.
So let's wrap this up. Let's do the Q&A. So if you want to listen to that again, you can find that on our Patreon. It's Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology Podcast, and we'll see you next time.